I am so happy that you accepted to participate in. This is going to be the 10th interview or talk for this channel, Changing the Narrative. And with me today, just to make a little introduction, I have Donen. She is based in Denmark, and she's a Danish lawyer and a board member of the NGO Everyday Sexism Project Danmark, which is a voluntary organization that collects experiences about everyday sexism and also informs, enlightens, and fights sexism. Sen also writes articles in various different newspapers and magazines. So you're definitely very active in the debate about sexism. I thought that maybe we could start out because I don't know you. This is our first talk. This is our first time that we actually speak together, but I do know the organization Everyday Sexism Project Danmark because I saw the group on Facebook. I know it's not only a group on Facebook, there's much more to it, but I was immediately sort of drawn to it because of the content that you have and because of what you show. And it goes very, it's very similar to really what I kind of want to do with this channel. And that is to talk about that sexism that, like you say, everyday sexism, or like we say here in Spain, where I'm based, we call it micro sexism. So it's that thing that we all kind of normalize or might not even recognize, but is still having a huge impact on all of us, men and women, and society. So I thought it was a very, very interesting organization and the way you work. So I would like to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about the organization, how you got involved, and what kind of work you do.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is sort of like the thing that we do in our organization. We talk about, we try to get out to as many people as possible with our message to enlighten people about everyday sexism and to give them hopefully some hope and some way of recognizing and combating sexism in their own lives. I was involved from the beginning. In 2012, Laura Bates in the UK started the Everyday Sexism Project with a webpage where she collected experiences about sexism. And in 2013, a team of Danish women started a Danish site, which is sort of like an underpage for the UK page, collecting experiences. And I was a part of a smaller Facebook page in 2013 that started up, and it grew bigger. And in 2015, we started as an organization, a volunteer-driven organization. In Denmark, people who are like-minded, if you get there's a joke that, you know, if you're two people that are interested in the same thing, you form an organization in Denmark. We are very much a country, as you know, but people outside Denmark might not know. We are very much a country of a lot of different volunteer-driven organizations. So this is one of them. And you can say that what differs us from other organizations that are interested in women's rights and so on is that we're very it's at the same time it's a very small topic and it's a very broad topic. But sexism is, we don't go out and call ourselves, oh, we're a feminist organization, we work for equality. We're very focused on sexism. So it's sort of like you could call it just a corner of the fight for women's liberation or equality or whatever. But you can also just say that it's, you know, it's a very big subject, actually.
Yeah, it is.
But it helps us because we are small and we are volunteer driven. So it helps us sort of like to narrow down what do we do and what do we focus on. And our main focus is on women and girls' experiences with sexism. But that is not to say that we don't acknowledge that men experience discrimination, that people with other gender will experience some sort of discrimination, which is close to sexism, that people who are racialized will also experience racialized sexism, and so on and so on. So, but our main focus is on women and girls, different kinds of women and girls experiences with sexism.
Yeah.
And as a small organization, we of course we try to do our best to fight sexism, but we know that, you know, it's first and foremost, we use our social media canals. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, but also, of course, we love to go out and for example, we go out to schools, we go out to youth political parties and so on, and we go out to, for example, we've been on Roskilde Festival, which is
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes, we have since 2015 we've been there 5 times on Roskilde Festival, talking to the guests and making flirting workshops, which we have also done a lot of other places. So we do things on the digital platforms, and we do things physically, and we go out and we debate with people in person. We try not to debate with people on social media, because then you might not do anything else. but we like to go out and make speeches and do debates and so on in real life. So yeah, I
think that's very, very powerful. And just for anyone who doesn't know, Roskilde Festival is one of the biggest festivals, I think, in Europe, with many participants every year. It's a huge festival. And so, I can imagine that is definitely a place where it would be good to have you present. And so you were saying flirting workshop. What does that exactly? Can you just make a short
our flirting workshop is you know, it's something that we invented because we wanted to have a fun name for something that is actually a bit serious.
Yeah.
But it's about making room for people to talk with each other in small groups about what is okay and what is not okay. What are your personal boundaries around flirting, around kissing, around sex, around relationships, and so on? And what do you do? What don't you do? What do you like? What don't you like? And we've taken the workshop to a lot of different places. So it's both groups of people that know each other beforehand and groups of people that don't know each other beforehand, but it gives sort of like a space. We give some scenarios, and it's a very short recap. We give people scenarios, we make them talk about the scenarios. And the good thing is that we get the feedback that we get is that it's really nice for people to have space to actually think about and try to verbalize what are my boundaries, but also experience that people are very different, because that's the fact that you can't, you know, sometimes you see some magazines that says, you know, 10 things to do, 10 things you shouldn't do, but people are very different. And that's sort of like the point is to open people's eyes to, you know, the very big variety of, you know, I like this, and also I don't like this.
Yeah.
So that's what we do with the flirting workshop. And we are also developing a workshop which is more oriented towards what to do to combat sexism. We call it Everyday Sexism Fighter. How do you combat sexism as a bystander, or a person that, you know, you can be a bystander in real life, or you can be, but you also with just people discussing things. It doesn't always have to be, you know, that you witness something, but you can also be sort of like a bystander for other people's conversations. It can be people that you know, people that you don't know, and it can be digitally, and it can be physically. So we have different kinds of workshops, and we go out and we talk a lot also to school kids and so on, and on a lot of different topics, but regarding primarily, of course, sexism, but also what is consent, and different kind of bystander related stuff. So yeah.
And I'm curious to know how, because I can kind of imagine, I guess, how women respond to the workshops, although I'm sure they're very different responses. But how do the men respond to your workshops? Are they surprised sometimes by what women say, or do you feel like they learn something, that they realize some things, or is that more a general thing for everyone that participates?
I don't think we see a lot of very binary reactions, men and women reactions. I think that what we see is that some people are more engaged in the topics that we talk about. Some people know a lot more, and some people really don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so the questions and the commentaries that we get are very varied.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes we will have some people, and they can be any gender, that are very skeptical towards the whole concept. Is it really a problem in Denmark? Do we really have sexism? And is it really mostly girls and women that experience different kinds of sexism? So, of course, that kind of response we do get. But mostly when people invite us out, we make sure that it is actually out of interest, and not to spend a lot of time just, defending and...
Yeah, it's not something you're imposing on people. It's kind of something they've already asked for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking because I think, so for people who don't know, Denmark has experienced a very large Me Too wave, let's call it, in the past year or so, because of a TV presenter, Sofia Linden, went on stage at a comedy show, I believe it was, and she shared an old personal story, and that kind of set things off. And then there were a lot more people who came out and shared, and the debate kind of really took off. Wouldn't you agree that that was around that time that the things like it became more like the debate has always been there, but
in 2013, when we started, sexism wasn't a topic that anybody knew anything about. It wasn't it wasn't described in media, and slowly it has started being something that people talk a lot more about. And what we experienced is that we have collected a lot of stories from 2013 and up to 2017, where the sort of like international, the hashtag Me Too gained a lot of traction in 2013. And the curious thing is that after 2013, it has been a lot slower for us actually to collect experiences, because before that, we were like the only place that people could actually say, I've experienced this, and could do it anonymously. And after 2013, a lot more people have gained the courage to get it out in the open, that they've actually been the victims of, and this is particularly sexualized violence in some sort, or harassment, assault. Because sexism is, of course, a lot wider, a lot broader topic than that. It's also, for example, stereotypical knowledge, stereotypical about gender and sexuality and so on. But after 2013, there's been a lot more people who openly went out and said, I have experienced harassment, I've experienced assault, and so on.
Yeah.
And then in a very typical Danish manner, I would say, there came so much backlash, because in Denmark, we have this notion that we are very equal, because we have a lot of formal equality. We have a lot of laws in place that give us formal equality, that give men and women the same rights and protects men and women. So what happened in 2013 was that there were a lot of people sharing experiences, but also a lot of media giving space to people that were very negative around the whole idea that we had a problem.
Yeah.
And what happened last year was that after this speech that Sofie Linde gave, was that it seemed like suddenly a lot more, in the meantime, from 2013 to 2020, a lot of firms and corporations, especially also media corporations, but also political parties, had went through a process of actually examining, do we have a problem in our organization, and finding out, yes, we do have a problem. So sort of like the ground was prepared for a new discussion, which actually started up again last summer. And this time, a much more serious discussion where the starting point wasn't, do we have a problem, but we do have a problem. Yeah. So what is the problem actually?
Yeah, and how to deal with it.
And that has been amazing as an organization. That has, we have been trying to make this a focus for really long time, and it has been amazing to see that it seems like the narrative is changing now to an acknowledgement that we do not have gender equality.
Yeah.
And that we do have a problem with harassment and with assaults, both in the workplace, which has been a big part of the discussion, but also outside the workplace. But a lot of other things has also done this, because we had for example, last winter, we had in the wake of the Sarah Everard case from UK, where a woman was killed on her way home from party, I think, or from the city,
from a friend's house, I think.
By a policeman. She was raped and killed by a policeman. And there was a hashtag campaign, text me when you get home. And we also had a very big discussion in Denmark. Why are women scared of men that they meet in the street? Because, the typical, we've had this discussion many times before, but this time it was in the outline a bit more serious, because it wasn't just, just relaxed, because it's, usually it's men who are, who are exposed to violence in the nightlife and so on. So just relax, because it's not you, and so on. This time it was more serious. And we have had a lot of these talks that weren't just about this one, the Me Too, the sexual harassment in the workplace, but also a lot of other places, which has been really, really great, because as an organization where we have focus on sexism, we have this pyramid. I don't know if you've seen it, but we have a pyramid showing what sexism is. And on top of the pyramid is, of course, the very serious problems with women getting killed by their partners or ex-partners, and rape and sexual assault and digital assaults, different kinds of sexualized violence and so on. But underneath that is the sexism that we experience on a more day-to-day basis, and as you said in the beginning, are normalized and many times are seen as something minor and something that we should just shrug our shoulders and say, oh, well, whatever, and it's just this one idiot and so on.
It's just a joke. I mean, look at the Christmas parties in Denmark, the company Christmas parties. I mean, that's a whole stereotypical image we have in Denmark of the things that go on for Christmas parties, right? Like the sexism, the cheating, the boss grabbing the secretary's ass, things like that is something that we all know. When we say Christmas party in Denmark, we all know this. In fact, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to tell you this. I have a Spanish friend who sold his company to a Danish company and therefore still works with them and travels back and forward to Denmark and between Denmark and Spain. And he has participated in, like the typical after beer party on Fridays with the company. And he told me, Louise, I was shocked by the way that the men behave towards the women on just a plain Friday afternoon after work, having a couple of beers, and how the women kind of just, accepted it. And it was just all jokes and haha, but it was really uncomfortable and very strange. That's how he described it. And this is a guy from Spain that is, I wouldn't say used to sexism, because it's not, but it's just, we often have this image of the southern countries being
more machismo and more stereotypical, gendered and so on.
Yeah, when it's actually exactly the same. I can tell you now from experience of having, grown up in Denmark and now living here in Spain for 16 years, it is absolutely the same. So shocking. Yeah. But that was just to tell you of this thing, that how we normalize sexism, how it's even a joke to people sometimes. It's definitely not, and it's minimized. Seriously. It's
minimized and it's normalized, and people are saying, just say whatever, it's fine, it's okay, and just smile and walk away and so on. Yeah. So this is what is on the bottom of the pyramid, is things like marginalizing on the basis of sex in the workspace. Being interrupted all the time by men, being asked to pick up the coffee even if you're the CEO, and so on. All these things in the workplace and outside the workplace. It's the jokes, as you say. It's the stereotypical division of toys, for example. It's the commercials that are very stereotypically aimed at people. It's all these little things that we grow up with, and sometimes we can only see the problem when we gender flip. You've probably seen all of these, the gender flip of the commercials, for example, how the women are posed, how they're always like objectified, sexualized, and so on, in a way that, okay, you can always find the examples with the men, but it's like 1 to 1 million in numbers. So
and often made as a joke, or something that's kind of silly.
And in Denmark, we love our jokes, and we are very we love to say that we've got like the best sense of humor, and if people can't laugh at everything, and I'm like, okay, this is also like pedophilia and necrophilia and stuff like that. If you can't laugh at like everything, then you just haven't got any humor, and then you're like an outcast in Denmark. So you're sort of like bullied into saying okay to a lot of sexism on the basis of, this is just funny. This is humor. You should be able to laugh at this. So, and we've had quite a few examples in the year that we've just went through with this, the funny sexism thing. And this is on the basis of the pyramid. And what you can say is like, when you say that it's like you said something about in Spain, you don't call it everyday sexism, you call it...
We call it micro,
yes.
Yeah, micro machismo, machismo being
exactly.
Sexism.
And this is, the pyramid is sort of like a picture of the microaggressions, the microsexism, which is like a death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. If you just cut once by something, a man shouts, nice tits after you on the street. it's fine. You can survive that. It's like, okay, I go home, I live my life. It's not a big deal. Yeah. But if you experience these microaggressions, it's like 1,000 cuts, and it actually starts to make a huge impact. My daughter, she's 22, and she's already had like thousands of experiences. Like last, I can't remember, I think she said we were with each other in the Christmas vacation, and she said just last week, a man in broad daylight walking down the street clapped her on the butt. And really? She'd never seen the man before. No. And I'm like, this happens to her so many times.
This was in Denmark.
Yes, in Denmark. Wow. Yeah, she's experienced this so many times. I'm telling you. And this is, but what I'm saying is, it's just like a couple of weeks ago, because we are very isolated. We have Corona, like you have, so people don't go out a lot, of course, and she doesn't go out a lot. But it's even when there are people actually in the streets, and it's broad daylight, this happens, and nobody says anything.
And now you can add the internet. Her generation, of like young people are exposed.
Exactly. It started when she was she was 13 was the first kind of messages that she got on the internet. There was like an app called Ask that was very popular, and she had so many, from I want to fuck you to I want to rape you. Yeah. And this is just, so it's what I'm saying is it's the things individually. When you look at these things, the everyday sexism individually, it's, you can say, well, it's not a big deal. You should brush it off. You should move on with your life. But the thing is, when it just adds on and on and on and on. And this is what actually, when you do normalize and minimize these things at the bottom, it creates the things that go on top of it. Yeah. Both because the people experiencing it get used to it. They think, okay, it's just, me being a bit hysterical and I shouldn't, and then it's very difficult to set your boundaries, because you get told that you should just shrug it off and move on with your life. And then it gets more and more, and people can invade your space in more and more ways. Yeah. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting to say no and set your boundaries all the fucking time. Yeah. So you give up, and then you actually create the things on top, because the people who are doing these things, and mostly men, also women, but mostly men who are doing these things, also sees the response, which is, well, you should just laugh at it. You shouldn't take it so seriously. And if somebody tells you no, you should just keep on, because the romantic comedies tell you that it's really romantic to stalk somebody, or to keep on, to break into their wedding and say, I want to marry you, and so on. All these things together gives the perpetrators also the message that this is okay, and this is expected in our society, and it is not something that people will think, are abnormal, because it's just what happens. Yeah. It's just how it's how you're a woman, and it's how you're a man. So this is why we like to use this pyramid, because usually when we talk about Me Too and we talk about assault, people in general can agree that we do have a problem. We should do something. We should do something about rape. We should do something about femicide. A lot of people will tell you, well, we can't do anything, but it's always going to happen. Like, it's always, people are getting, killed in traffic accidents. But most people will say, yes, let's, this is a problem. Let's do something about it. But the problem is that if you don't do something about the things underneath, if you don't do something about the everyday sexism, then you won't be able to do something about the things at the top, because they lay the foundation. And that is why when people, for example, on social media will go into our page and say like, why do you care about, this and that? And then we say, well, we do, because this is just one little piece in a very big puzzle.
Yeah.
And yes, if you look at this piece individually, it's not a big problem. But the thing is that there is a greater picture, and we have to look at it from far away to see how it's all connected, and it is all connected. And what we think is really nice is that we can see that also the media are taking, are looking more at structural and cultural explanations now. Before we had the problem that, it was always like, you see every case as just one individual case. And now we can actually begin to talk about structural sexism, which is really great, because what we have experienced in Everyday Sexism Project Denmark is that we get called for the little things. For example, they're like, we saw this whatever commercial something, and are you upset about it? And we're like, well, we can talk about this, but we don't want to talk about it if we can't, talk about the structure that it goes into, the culture that it actually undermines, and so on. Because they love to just put organizations like us in a spotlight and say, these feminists, they only care about the little things. Yeah. And, they get so excited that a man said something about, put her back in the kitchen and so on. But the big things they don't care about, which is a lie, of course. Yeah. But they love to put us out like that, that we only care about the little things. And we do care about the little things, but we care about how they, in combination with all the other little things, actually create quite a big problem.
Yeah. That is such an important point, I think, really. And it's a great way of illustrating it with this pyramid. Actually, the reason why I began talking about how the Me Too kind of movement or wave in Denmark really took off last summer was because lately I've heard comments, which is very much what we're talking about now with everyday sexism, are comments from men that I think have a hard time of, I understand it's a transition period for them as well, but I think they have a hard time of grasping or understanding completely what this is about, because I hear comments like, oh, well, now I can't say anything to women. Now these days you can't even buy a drink to a woman in a bar. And I was thinking about this because of your flirting workshop, right? Because and I try to tell them, of course you can buy a drink for a woman, it's not about that. And I think that all or most human beings that are, well functioning, they will know and understand in the situation how to be respectful to someone. And of course, if you, in a polite way, or if you ask someone, can I buy you a drink? The person will either say yes, thank you, or no, that's okay, you don't have to pay for my drink. We can all be polite and respectful about it. That's not really what sexism is about. But not a lot, but some men, I feel, now twist the debate and kind of puts themselves in the light of, oh, but now I can't do anything. Mm-hmm. So how do you respond to comments like that?
There's so many discussions in this, but I'll try to start with the very popular little video called Tea Consent. Mm-hmm. From I think I can't remember if it's from Scotland or from England, but it's the police in UK made this little cartoon that's called Tea Consent. And it says, there's two stick persons, and it says, consent is like tea. You ask, do you want some? And if the person says no, you don't pour the drink in their mouth. If they're passed out or sleeping, you don't pour the drink. You don't say, you wanted tea yesterday, so you should want it now. This is an analogy for sex, of course.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of people say, it's this simple. Consent is this simple, and Me Too is this simple. And then you have the other group of people that are like, well, there's so many gray areas, and we don't know what to do, and you can't do anything now because you'll get accused of something and false accusations and so on. I'm so scared. And some people, of course, are actually scared, and they are confused. And I think it's legitimate, because yes, for a lot of people, consent and where's the line between flirting and assault is easy. It's easy to distinguish because they have empathy, they've had a lot of experience, they are brought up in a place where, you respect each other, and you have a lot of practice in, what do you do and what not to do. But I can understand the thing, and the worry and the confusion and the fear if you are not brought up like that. If you because in our culture, a lot of people are not brought up to actually really respect each other's boundaries.
Yeah.
We cross children's boundaries every day. For example, we have children giving a hug to granny because, she gave you a present, or she's here, or whatever. Yeah. When they say, I don't want that. We don't respect, for example, if they say, I don't want to be kissed. There are a lot of, we take them places they don't want to go out of the door, and we pick them up and we put them in the car chair because we have to go to kindergarten now, and they scream and they cry and so on. And we're like, you have to do this because mommy has to go to work, or daddy has to go to work. So, of course, there's a problem for some people to understand what is this, what is going on now, what can I do, like what can't I do. And some of it is people who just want to make a problem out of something that shouldn't be a problem, and some people just want to be very provocative, and they say, well, I can't say anything anymore, and they know it's not the case. But some people are actually genuinely confused. And of course, we have to also address this confusion. So if people say that to me, I can't say anymore, men can't say anymore, I usually try and ask them, what do you actually mean when you say that? What is it that you are confused about? What is it that you are afraid about? Maybe I can enlighten you on some points. Because if they are genuinely confused and scared, then of course we can talk about it. Let's talk about it. I think we have experiences sent to us about rape, where the man in the rape scenario returns to the woman and he's like, he has no idea what he's done. He says, can't I see you again? It was so nice. I have one experience where the woman said to him, I really don't like this. I get scared of you when you do this, and I don't want to be here anymore. And she got out, and afterwards she contacted him and said, you know what, you actually really scared me. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that I scared you. So that's why all of the women I've been with have acted like they don't want to see me again.
Oh, wow.
And it's, that is really worrying because the man seemingly didn't have any idea that his behavior, that his very violent way of holding her and choking her, which she avoided, but he was trying to choke her. He held her down. even that she resisted and so on. I don't know where a man like that gets it from. I don't know if it's seeing porn. I don't know if it's just that he has been, subjected to something in his childhood or whatever. But the thing is that some people actually don't know how to behave. And that's a big problem. But what I also think is that a lot of men do know when they actually are on a border or trying to cross some boundaries. And the problem here is that they've learned that if they are not aggressive, if they're not outgoing and taking the initiative, then nothing happens. Mm-hmm. And a lot of women are used to the men taking the initiative. And some women will even say, if he doesn't do this and that, if he doesn't take the initiative, I want him to, throw me around and so on, because that shows that he really wants me. Mm-hmm. And if these men have experienced women like that, I can understand why they're confused, but also I think that they do know deep inside that they're crossing a boundary, and they're just waiting for a response. And if the women are like, I don't want to do this, then they're like, okay. But the thing is, about 20% of women have experienced assault in their lifetime, 19% some sort of sexual violence when they're over 15. I think it's 13% under 15. And that means that a lot of women can't say no. They'll just freeze. They'll maybe just lie still and wait for it to be over. They might even do the tending instinct is also a trauma response that protects you. Yep. It's like, saying to the man, okay, you're here with a man, he clearly wants to have sex. Okay, if I say to him, I'll give you a blowjob, then something worse might not happen. And then she says, can I give you a blowjob? And he thinks, well, nice, I like a blowjob. He doesn't see this as a sexual assault. So there's a problem with victims generally of all genders of sexual assaults, because they need a partner that are a lot more aware of what it looks like when you experience trauma. And then there are men who, and also women, but that don't recognize what assault is, and those who do recognize it, but they just don't care. And if you're not very, violently fighting, then they're like, well, it's better than nothing. Yeah. And these people are really a problem, because what we do know from research is that a lot of people who rape do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. Yeah. To prevent that, we must have a talk with ourselves and amongst our friends and so on about what does trauma look like, what does boundaries look like, what does consent look like, what is sex, and we must also be better at calling out our friends that we can see have problematic views about these things. If they say, well, it's not really rape if you're in a relationship, then you must say, well, yes, it is. It's actually very common. And also that you don't have to say no to somebody, because the thing is, if you get a yes, but the option of saying no is really not there, because that then, the person, your partner will say, I'm committing suicide, I will leave you. You are not the one that I wanted to be with. Why are you not as you were in the beginning of our relationship? The guilt, the shame, maybe a threat of violence and so on. If you don't have that option, then the yes doesn't mean yes. Yeah. So we have a lot of learning to do. And I think when we get these questions, or these, comments like, you can't say anything anymore and women are just, making up stuff and so on, then I think the best way of responding is ask questions, ask them. So what is it really that you're afraid of? Where do you have your knowledge from? What do you actually know about this? Why do you have any experiences with you that has something happened to you that made you wary of women or flirting or whatever? And I would like to talk to you about that.
Yeah, because often I feel it's a thing that is just repeated in media or social media, and other men just repeat the same comment. It's not really because they have their own personal experience. It's not that they have actually been to a bar, asked the woman if he could buy them a drink and got a snotty answer. Usually that's not the case. So like you say, if you address that person and ask him, what is your experience? Why do you feel like this? I think that's a good approach. There's like about a million things I wanted to talk about and ask you about, and I know we're not going to be able to do that in so short time. But I did want to ask you if you know about this article that was written by a forensic investigator in Denmark. I believe his name is Asser Hedegaard Thomsen. Yeah. So I'll just shortly
he made a PhD. Right. He made a PhD about homicide in Denmark in the past 25 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so interesting, and I wanted to bring it up because this is the article that made me realize a lot of things about Denmark and about myself, because my image of Denmark was we are a country of equality, full of strong, independent Viking women. Spain, where I live, is a country that is very old-fashioned, old traditional gender roles, a lot of sexism, a lot of domestic violence. That was kind of my image of the two countries. I read this article and I was so surprised by what he had found out. Basically, what he says is he studied the past 25 years of homicides, all homicides committed in Denmark. He then looks at the reason why women have been killed, and it turns out that the most frequent reason why women are killed in Denmark is actually due to their partners or domestic violence. So we're actually talking about a 26% of all homicides that are due to domestic violence, women being killed, and it is a 56% if we're only looking at the homicides, the female homicides, so women being murdered. So it's more than half of the women that are murdered in Denmark are being murdered because they were women. For me, that was crazy to read it. I had no idea. And I had no idea that domestic violence was such a big problem in Denmark. And I realized that it's a global thing. It's not just a thing for, southern countries. No, it's all over the world. It's a huge issue, and it tends to be the most frequent reason why women are being killed. And so that just really changed my image of what is Denmark. And I started remembering how it was to grow up in Denmark. And I grew up with a single mom. So I was very much, influenced, and I guess by an independent woman who lived alone and who had to do everything herself. If we had to hang up a picture, well, she would hammer in the nail and things like that. She would paint, she would do everything. And I very much felt like an independent, strong woman growing up. But I also remembered all the, the sexism, all of a sudden I could put a word to it because it was sexism. All the comments, all the things, all the doubts, the harassment, even sexual harassment, the comments, the commercials, all the stuff that you were talking about before, which is in the bottom of the pyramid. And it was interesting to me when you just spoke about that, because trauma came to my mind. That you can almost compare it to a sort of trauma, that when you keep putting things on top and on top and on top, it's kind of like if you have experienced something, let's compare it to maybe a rape or something similar, something much bigger, and you keep pushing it down and forgetting it and not talking about it, and it just kind of grows inside you. And I think, can it maybe be compared a little bit to that, a thing that grows inside you, and all of a sudden one little sexist comment is what really is going to hurt you and going to feel like a trauma.
That's why I'm saying death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you could look at other groups that marginalized groups, for example, how experiencing racism affects your life. Yeah, and it does affect your life. It affects your life in a profound way. So, if of course it's different from trauma relating to an episode where you felt like your life was under threat. But it does have a profound impact on your life. And one of the impacts is, of course, that you will internalize it. You will internalize the sexism. You will, a lot of women play along with the sexism. And
especially in Denmark, I think, with the jokes like we talked about.
Yeah, for example. But I do think also that it's interesting. I tried to find that. Well, sorry, while you were talking, and I don't know if this is possible to see, but this is a graphic showing murders in Europe committed by a partner, rape per 100,000 inhabitants in selected countries. It's from 2013, from Eurostat, and the Danish number is 0.21. Murders in Europe committed by a partner per 100,000 people. Underneath us is France, 0.18, England and Wales, 0.13, Spain, 0.12, Italy, 0.11, Greece, 0.1. So we are at almost twice the rate as Spain. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is that you are talking about the conservative values as I see them, the conservative stereotypes in Spain. And in Denmark, yes, we do have this view upon ourselves that we are far beyond that. Mm-hmm. But if you look at how women sitting in groups for, they're pregnant and they're in their little Facebook groups about pregnancy and small children and so on, and they're like, does anybody have, some baby clothes for girls in this size? Because my firstborn was a boy. Yeah. So apparently, little girls cannot wear the same thing because, I don't know what. Yeah. And it's incredible how we're thinking that we've actually moved past this, but you still get the question when you go inside a toy store and you ask, can I get this wrapped? And they're like, is it for a boy or a girl? Because they have two different colors for the wrapping paper. Yeah. And you will still get, a lot of people arguing that, men and women are biologically different. So men can't do this, women can't do that. Women are better at this and men are better than that. And the thing is that this is, this is a problem that we're dealing with, that we can't actually talk about sexism without talking about that we're trying to erase it and say it's not a problem. But the other thing is that, we do have these homicides committed by a partner or an ex-partner actually at alarming rates, that you're in Spain, you have like a national, awareness about femicides. Yeah. You don't have that in Denmark. We don't have that much of a focus. We do have focus, but not as much as you do in other countries. And I think a part of this is because we get a backlash. Because we are moving beyond some of the stereotypes, we're moving towards more equality, we do get a backlash, because every time in history that we have fought for women's rights, for equality and so on, some people, mostly men, but also other women, will fight back. Yeah. And they get frustrated, they get angry, and they get violent. Yeah. Because they see some of their privileges disappearing. Yeah. And I think that is what is happening. Why do we have these murders? It's because these men, they can see that the women will walk away and they can do whatever they want with their life without them. They can do without them. Yeah. And that is, that's part of, fighting for equality, is that you will have people being violent because they don't want to lose their privileges, and because they can see their privileges slipping through their fingers. And I think that's why we have violence against women at that rate, and homicides at that rate that we have in Denmark.
Yeah, it's exactly what you say, that I became aware of the fact that in Spain, they're actually very proactive regarding this. And some years ago, they made some new laws that were specifically for domestic violence and to aid women. And you can see that it has actually helped, and it has brought down somewhat the numbers. Also, a huge difference, for instance, is every time there is a homicide due to domestic violence in Spain, it is on television. There's 1 minute of silence. It is on the news all over the place. Women go out on the, typically where the murder has taken place, all the neighbors will come out and they will do 1 minute of silence. They make a very big thing out of it every single time. And they keep announcing also the numbers, like so far this year we have so many. And you don't see that in Denmark. You might have an article here and there, some woman got murdered, but nobody knows really about the issue. So there isn't a focus on it, nor do I think, I don't know, is there any specific laws to try and
yeah, this is one of the things that we have tried in Everyday Sexism Project Denmark. We made a guide for the media to how to handle media cases on gendered violence, sexual violence, digital violence, physical violence, partner homicide, and so on. And this is one of our points, is to contextualize, to inform, so that, for example, when you report from a case of partner homicide, femicide, then you contextualize, you say, this is a problem. We have these statistics, we have the knowledge that there are typically in these cases 8 steps before the homicide. We don't have an action plan, we don't have enough education about this, and we should, and so on. So that is one of the points that we make in our guide to the media, because it is very important to put it into context every time we take these single cases, because of course they should report about the single cases, but they should also put it into context of the structural problems that we do have.
Yeah. And one of the things I really liked about, I read a couple of your articles, because I said in the beginning, you also do write for some magazines and newspapers, and I read 2 of your articles. What I thought was so powerful about them is that you refer so much to numbers and statistics and facts, really. It's not so, I mean, of course, we also have to talk about emotions and how we feel, but sometimes it's also very important to put the numbers on the table. I mean, that article or PhD from the forensic investigator that put hardcore facts on the table and really told you in percentages and told you that this was the main or most frequent reason for why women were being murdered, really opened my eyes. And I think that can be quite powerful in this type of debate, to enlighten people of how big the problem really is. I also know that you yourself, unfortunately, was raped, and your daughter as well. You spoke about it in the articles. How did that affect you when you, having experienced something that traumatic yourself, when your daughter came and told you?
Yeah, well, of course it affected me deeply. I mean, that's like the one thing that I think every parent fears. And it took a couple of weeks before she told me. And I think because she knew that, of course, that it would, that her parents, that me and her father would be really upset and really sorry. And I think a lot of victims have that experience, that they don't talk about it to the people closest to them, because either they're afraid that they won't be believed. For example, if it's somebody that's the people around them actually know, which is the case in most cases of rape.
Yeah.
Not in this case, but most cases. And also, if they do believe, then that they will have to handle not only their own sorrow and their grief and trauma, but also the people around them.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult enough to handle your own feelings. How do you also, handle the people around you? So I think it was a learning experience, because I've talked to a lot of rape victims, but they haven't been my daughter.
Yeah.
So I think it was, a first-hand experience. How do you actually handle being close to someone who has had sexual assaults, happening to them? And I'm still tearing up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm asking you because I think it's something that really is so important, that we start giving the voice to the victims, and that so they can talk about it from their point of view as well. I'm saying this because the last conversation, well, two conversations before you, I spoke to an Argentinian filmmaker, and her sister, who lives in Buenos Aires, is a survivor of a femicide attempt. So she was stabbed by a young boy, a man, and afterwards it turned into a whole media circus, because this was together with another. It was at a dance school, and it was together with another kind of semi-famous dance teacher or dancer. Both of them got stabbed, and the sister, so the filmmaker I was speaking to, she was so upset about how the media had treated the victims, how they had exposed their lives, how much focus there was on all these bloody, gory images of them, how they took their private photos from Instagram, how they were talking about who they were dating and all these intimate details, and completely left out the aggressor. They blurred his face. They wouldn't, say his name, all to kind of protect him. And so we had a long conversation about that, and about how to give the voice, not the image, the voice to the victims, and how to put the focus on them. Because at the same time, as I was talking to her about, we don't want to really name him and glorify him and give him his 15 minutes of fame, because unfortunately, especially when we talk about, serial killers or serial perpetrators, they sometimes are actually looking for that kind of fame or attention. And so this whole thing about giving serial killers nicknames and stuff like that is something that I have learned now to try and refrain from and not do, not really name them. But at the same time, we don't want to take the attention away from the victim either.
And it's a delicate balance, because
it is.
also it is tiring that we have to again and again lay bare our trauma as survivors, as victims. I myself also a rape victim, and it gets tiring that you have to talk about your trauma again and again and again, and often in detail and so on, and people will reporters will ask you details, because this is what the people reading the article will ask themselves. And this is one of the well, maybe not, and maybe you shouldn't just think that every person on the street should have their question asked. You also have to draw a line, because what we would like to do is actually to get the spotlight on the perpetrators, to get the spotlight on how do we not make perpetrators out of human beings? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And you can't. The problem with always focusing on the victim is that you sort of get the attention away from, you get the attention on how could she have done something different, or he, and then and you would rather like to say, how can we as a society prevent this guy or this woman or whatever, how can we prevent the perpetrator in doing it again, and how do we prevent any more perpetrators from becoming perpetrators? And we do have to look at the perpetrators to prevent. That is very important, because it is really difficult to lay yourself open again and again. And I think it's important, and for a lot of victims, it is a part of their healing that they get to tell their story. And I won't minimize that. But it is also really important that we get to the prevention part, where the focus is off the victims. Because the risk is that we keep on getting the same questions, which is, how can we protect our daughters? Should we, that's also a question for me, what could you have done differently? That is what you will ask yourself as a parent. Could I have done something differently? Could I have told her, do never, go home to a stranger, or never go out and, after 12 o'clock, or never walk alone, and, could I have done something? That is what every parent will ask themselves when they see these stories on the news. And they will think, luckily, I have always said to my daughter that she should do A, B, and C. The thing is, you can do absolutely nothing if you don't look at the perpetrators, if you don't look at prevention at the source, which is, the perpetrator and not the victim.
So the focus should be on what can we do to prevent young boys growing up becoming perpetrators and aggressors.
And also young girls. We shouldn't, I just want to have the nuance with me that, one of the myths surrounding rape is that men cannot be raped, which is actually laying the ground for women to assault men. We have experiences like men waking up at a party, they've fallen asleep because they're drunk or they're tired, and a woman has had their penis in their mouth or sitting on top of them, and these women will think that they've done nothing wrong, because when a penis is erect, he wants to. But these myths are also making perpetrators. So what we should do is we should do a lot of enlightening about what is assault, what is consent, what are boundaries, and And we should, go out and make this, a public debate, because a lot of people are saying that we need to teach our children in school, and we do need to teach our children in school, because we can't always think that the parents will teach, but we also do need to teach the adults, because the adults are also committing assaults and doing harassment and so on. So it's not just that we have to make a new generation, but we also have to have these conversations amongst us, the adults, at home, at the workplace, everywhere we can do it.
Yeah, and I think you're never too old to learn something new, right? I mean, we're all a little bit a victim of the society we have grown up in. So we've all been influenced. We've all, I don't know if indoctrinated is a very big word, but somehow
we've internalized the stereotypical notions of what is sex and what is gender and so on. And you can see, for example, my mother's generation. In her generation, there was a common saying that, if you've said A, you must say B. Meaning, if you've kissed this guy, you've actually said yes to have sex with him. Yeah. So they didn't think that it was assault, because, I knew what I was going in. I went home with him, or I kissed him, or whatever. And happily, in my generation, your generation, that has changed. But we can learn a lot, and we should, because it's not just the young people and the kids that needs. It's actually us that have not respected our kids' boundaries, and we should have done that. So we have a lot of learning to do as well.
No, definitely, and there's still a lot of victim blaming going on when you look at cases like that. And there's always, like you also spoke about before, what could you have done? Maybe you shouldn't have worn this skirt. Maybe you shouldn't have gone home at 3 o'clock in the morning alone. Things like that. The blame seems to be put on the victim always, and that needs to shift. And that is something that we, all of us have to start changing the way we think of things. And that's why I think language, words are so important. Therefore, I chose the title Changing the Narrative, because I think it's so powerful how a narrative is like what we see. It's the image that we all kind of share. It's that stereotypical image we have of certain things or certain people, genders, race, etc. And it's hard to break that sometimes. But I think with information, and especially debate, and what we're doing now, having a conversation and feeling that there is a sort of a safe space for you to express yourself and debate things. I feel like I'm learning something every time I have these conversations. So that's great. Zen, I could really go on and on and on, and I feel like this conversation that I've had with you has probably been the most chaotic because there are so many things I wanted to talk about, and it's maybe has become a little bit superficial. Maybe I should have just chosen one topic for you. But I thought it was really so interesting, and I encourage everyone to, I know only Danish people or people who speak Danish will be able to read on your website and on the Facebook, but if you do speak Danish, I definitely encourage people to go and look at Everyday Sexism Project Danmark, and look at the content on all your social media accounts, because it's really, really, really interesting. And also there is, of course, the Everyday Sexism English version, which you can also have a look at. I do feel like you guys are more active, at least on Facebook and Instagram. And then I want to, because we're at the top of the hour, I'm going to ask you if you have any last words, anything, either advice or something you want to tell us or promote.
No, famous last words. I don't know. I think you said, please go and follow us. And yes. And also, that, I think it's important to know that you as a single person, sometimes you can feel like, I've just stepped into this, and how can I make a difference? I'm just one person. That it's important for everybody to know that you can make a difference. I mean, I'm just one person, and I think that I've tried to make a difference. People tell me that I have made a difference. So, and everybody can, because we can have these conversations. It's really important to have these conversations with the people closest to us, our family, our colleagues at work or at study, or people online. A lot of people are very anxious about going on Facebook and participating in debates. And I can understand that, because it can be really tough and you have to take breaks from it sometimes. But you can make a difference if it's just, liking somebody, their comment that you think is the best comment on a topic, like, an article about sexism or whatever, and somebody is saying, you shouldn't victim blame, and you can like that comment. And it's the small things, because also, like the pyramid, it is the small things that can actually make a change in the top of the pyramid. So I encourage everyone to just do a little, so we'll be stronger together.
Yeah. That's good. That's good words to end this conversation. And I'm very sorry if it was a little bit too superficial, some of it, because these topics are very serious, and obviously we could go way more deep into each of them and talk more about them. But as you say, encourage everyone to take part and also do your own research. I, for instance, have found a couple of wonderful books about history. The history of women, especially in Denmark, that were very, very interesting and enlightening for me, and it gives me a different perspective on how did we get to where we are today. So I think going into and reading history is also an interesting approach.
And Laura Bates have written some really, really good books about everyday sexism. The last book she wrote was about men who hate women, about the whole manosphere, from incels to men's rights activists and so on, and misogyny online and in real life. So I will always recommend Laura Bates' books.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stan. This has been great having you on, and I wish you all the best. Hope we can stay in contact.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.